I'm Sara Tucker. You're Denise Everhart. You are the representative from the 57th district?
53rd district.
55th. Now you see, I should have looked my stuff up. I know it was 2 districts off of Joan Wagnon's. How's
Yes,
that for
53rd district.
53rd district of the Kansas Legislature, which is Topeka and Tecumseh, really.
Yeah, well actually I have very little of the city. I have very little of Topeka. I have mostly the county. I call it, I guess, Eastern Shawnee County because I have it from the south to the north. So I have Barreton, Tecumseh, and then some Soldier Township up north. So it really kind of wraps around Shawnee County.
Okay. This is the Washburn University Kansas Legislative Women Oral History Project. And you understand that we will be using the results of these interviews for scholarly research. 1 copy of the transcript will be placed on deposit in the Kansas State Historical Society, 1 at Washburn University, and you will receive a copy of the transcript. Well, let me get right into it. How did you get into politics?
By going to Washburn University, probably. I had some interest along that way. Is probably the first recollection was when I was in junior high, and I had a friend whose dad was a sheriff and ran. It was a elective office, and he ran, and we used to distribute flyers for the mayor or things like that, anything that we could to just be involved. I guess I was a real follower of, the first real candidate that I was a follower of was Bobby Kennedy. Followed him when I was in junior high and was devastated, of course, when he was gone. And so then I kind of lost interest, actually. And it didn't emerge again until when I finally went back to college and took history and political science, and those were my majors. And got into an intern program in political science, and interned for Governor Carlin in 1985 and 86. It just kind of fell into it, really. Got placed there, really enjoyed it, and he asked me to work on staff, and so that really is where my involvement was. And then never really envisioned myself as being the office holder. Rather, I always kind of saw myself as being the staff. And then in my district, at that time it was called the 59th district, actually, the first time I ran. And the representative was Charlie Laird, and he was retiring. He actually left office in the middle of his term because he was appointed to the Board of Tax Appeals. So it was kind of, there was this opening, and it sounded pretty interesting, and I liked helping people, and I had different people ask me why didn't I just go ahead and run for the office. So that's what I did, and I won, and I went for re-election this last time. So just starting my 3rd year.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Although he left in the middle, you didn't get appointed.
I did, actually. Actually, I was appointed in August. What happened is he left just prior to primary time in May. I think he actually resigned May of 88. And there were, gosh, how many of us were there in the primary?
I seem to recall a lot.
Yeah, I think there was like 3 Democrats. 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. There was primaries on both sides. And so what the party, in essence, decided to do was wait and see who won the primary. They didn't want to, pick a candidate. They thought they'd let, the voters in the district pick. And so the primary ran, and I was successful in the primary and won in August of 88, and was appointed then just a few days after the primary election. So actually, I did serve in 88 from August until, the end of that term of December, and served on like some interims, but there was no, of course, session at that time.
So how come you won? What did you do right? What was your support?
Well, I think my support was really very varied. I got a lot of support from people in education who when I met with them, I got a lot of support from educators in the district. Got support just from friends and neighbors, I guess. Probably family participation was the reason that I won, because we really just outwalked the other candidates, I think. I went door to door every day, every afternoon, even in the middle of the 100-degree days. My kids went with me, my husband went with me nights and weekends, and I think we just talked to everybody, and I think the personal contact probably meant a lot. I didn't have any more money than anybody else, and I really didn't do any more we did a couple of mailers, but no different than what the other primary candidates were doing. So I really think it was the personal contact and just getting out, and evidently what I said appealed to the voters more than maybe what some of the other candidates did. It was in luck, I suppose.
Then for the election, I remember you actually got a little newspaper coverage. Isn't this the one where it was literally your neighbor?
It literally was my next door neighbor. Actually, my next door neighbor was my general opponent. So that it was really strange. It was an odd feeling. You know, you always knew what the other person was up to because there'd be mass cars at somebody's house, and you'd say, okay, there's a weekend drop going on because there would be all the cars. So. Yeah, it was a tough campaign. She was very very dedicated too, and wanted, I think, very genuinely to represent the district, and worked very hard and campaigned very hard, and so it was a very clean race. I don't think either of us ever had anything really bad to say about the other. We both just wanted to represent the people and had our own opinions on how to go about doing that. But it was a nice race, I thought, in that sense, and that we were both very much above board and really representing ourselves to the people.
So why do you think you won your general race?
I think I won my general because my background, probably having had some experience in both the governor's office, and I had interned in the Senate in law school, and I think that helped. So I think it was experience and education, actually. I think most voters are very concerned about who they pick. Not all, but I think most of them. I think we have in this district anyway, in the 53rd, very concerned. I have very concerned constituents who are, a lot of them, very well educated themselves, and they wanted someone, I guess, that they felt was really up to the challenge. I think they looked at it as a real serious position and wanted somebody, and I think that helped. I think the fact that I had some experience in both branches, and I think education. I was, had gone through law school, and I just think those things, and we obviously differed on issues. I don't want to slight that either. I mean, I think they looked at us a lot personally as people in our backgrounds, and I think they looked at where we were on the issues, and she did differ from me on a lot of the issues.
Could you give me what you think were the crucial issues?
Support for education was a big issue. I come from a district that's real supportive of education, and I was generally very supportive of issues for teachers' pay, trying to improve that, recognizing that it's still a lot of it is local district decisions, but a lot of it's based on how much funding that you get, and I was very supportive of increasing state funding for education. I think that helped. Some of the other issues, I think, in my district, education was a prime issue, but so was, I think there was a lot of interest in what's going on with juvenile offenders, believe it or not. It's not a much talked about issue, but because of YCAP being in Topeka, and some of the area being to the north and the east, people were concerned about that. And it was an issue that I personally was interested in and talked about. And healthcare. Healthcare wasn't being talked about a lot, but most people are really hurting on healthcare. And it wasn't something that people were talking about 2 years ago. I was talking about it because I knew, especially for state workers, I have a lot of state workers in my district, and it was a real important issue to them because they in essence lose. I mean, we give them a salary increase every year, but in essence they lose because their health insurance, the rate of increase for health insurance more than eats up any kind of cost of living that they see. So those issues.
How would you describe your district? Now, you've given us geographically, and I think you've pretty much hinted at a lot of its characteristics.
How would I describe my district characteristics? Professional. It's varied in the sense that there's a lot of professional. I'd say it's basically made up of a lot of professional people, a lot of two-income families. Most of them are career on both the wife and the husband. But then on the other extreme is I have a district that's very much represented by just your blue-collar worker. A lot of people who are involved in their labor unions. So I have a lot of labor interests. So it's kind of a combination district, really. I mean, I see both sides. I see the professional point of view, and I see the blue-collar workers' point of view, because it's very varied. But it's a lot of work. I just think a lot of working people, really. Most of my district is not, unlike some other districts where you have a lot of, maybe a large community, an older part of town in Topeka where there's a lot of retired individuals. Mine is mostly young. I see mostly younger families.
Okay. Would you call it a basically Democratic district?
No, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I know some people would, but I wouldn't, because the registration is very split, and I have a large number of unaffiliated voters that I think really vote their mind for the person. I don't think they vote for a party at all. I know sometimes people class unaffiliates as leaning more heavily Democrat, but I haven't really seen that as true. I think the unaffiliated voters that I have truly are unaffiliated in the sense that they vote for the person that they like.
Why are you a Democrat?
Why am I a Democrat? I guess because I've never thought about being anything else. My family was Democrat. My dad was a railroad worker, union railroad worker, came up. I mean, you just didn't, I guess, live in our house unless you were a Democrat. It's the only thing that I've ever known, I guess.
Okay. And obviously you've never found any reason to change it. It fits what you...
Yeah, it fits, and I guess I've always, not to criticize my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because I think some of them generally are concerned about people too, but I do see the Democratic Party as one that's more involved with the people issues, and that's always impressed me.
So here you are. This is the beginning of your third year. Could you tell me what you think your job is as a legislator? And I assume it's got more than one part. And how you try to go about getting your job done.
That's a difficult question. It seems like my job differs from day to day. I guess primarily it is to represent the interests of the people that I'm serving. I mean, I really see it as a public service job. I mean, I'm there to not only watch the legislation that comes across my desk and hope that, I can vote in a way that pleases the people that I'm here for and doesn't impact them negatively, but so I mean, that's obviously there. I'm there for that part of it, but I'm also there to bring ideas for those people. I always have an open door policy as far as for introducing legislation if someone in my district asks, so that's my job. I feel like I'm personally here to be their voice, and I try to do that. But I'm also a handholder. I'm also the person that I get called, to come out because the county is cutting down all of their trees along the right-of-way and they can't understand it. So I mean, I'm there, kind of an on-call person for whatever is bothering them. I try to be anyway. Sometimes it's hard to do that all the time, but it just, I don't know. It's a be everything, do everything job, more so than I would have ever imagined.
How do you get it done, and what are the problems with getting it done?
Well, the problems with getting it done is that you begin to recognize that what may be real important to the people in your district is not at all important to somebody in a district somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So it's very frustrating because you do sometimes have to compromise and try to reach a middle so that you can help your district, but you haven't hurt somebody's district somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to reach that happy medium. How you get it done, sometimes you don't, and that's real frustrating too. I mean, sometimes you just don't, and you realize you're not going to be able to. I mean, I guess I'm thinking, some of the tax issues. There's not always going to be an answer, and I don't know if you really get it done. I guess you just keep plugging along. I mean, that's how you get it done. You keep trying. You talk to people. I have a real good relationship with most of the people I think in the legislature. That helps. I'm not unwilling to listen to the other side, and I think that's real important. Sometimes people come in real set and sure that they know the best answer and the only answer. And I think you have to be prepared to listen to the other side as to why maybe your particular point of view for your district doesn't work somewhere else, and you have to try to strive to reach that midpoint. So I always try to be real willing to listen, and I think that helps.
If you were asked how does the legislature work, I presume you'd turn green and say that's a hard thing to answer. But I kind of want to ask that anyway. Both in terms of your 2.5 years and in terms of what you know about the legislature before, how do you think it works? What's the power structure? What are the different choices of styles to get things done?
Oh, how does it work? Sometimes it seems like it's mass hysteria that somehow all comes together in the pressure points of the last few weeks, and things get accomplished. And sometimes I ask myself, how did anything get accomplished? Gosh, that's a really tough one. How does it work? I think it's a combination, I guess, of a lot of things. Lots of different personalities, lots of different pressure groups that come. People who genuinely are trying to do what's right for their own people, and then sometimes find out along the way that what people think is right for them really isn't right for them. I mean, you find out that sometimes that the impression is not, or what people think is going to really work doesn't, and so you have to kind of then go back out and educate your own people. I mean, that's a job too, I guess. Sometimes it isn't always just coming up here and voting everything that you've been told by your people that that's what they want. Sometimes you almost have to go back out and re-educate them as to why it doesn't work. I haven't answered your question, have I?
Well, in a way,
the power struggles. There are definitely power struggles. I guess as a female member of the legislature, I see some different power struggles. I think there are definitely a lot of the women that I serve with, probably myself included, are real aggressive. I mean, I think we're here because we were aggressive and weren't afraid to kind of just barge right in, so to speak. But if you're not very careful about how you channel that, you offend the people that you have to work with. Because most of the power struggle is not necessarily, although in the House side it's changed somewhat. We do have women in power now. I mean, a women majority leader. That helps a lot. But that's not so in the Senate, and you have to work with the Senate. So I think there's still you have to be very careful. Majority still is male, and you need their votes for your issues. So you have to channel it in the right direction. You can be aggressive, but you can't stomp on them, if you know what I mean. I mean, you have to. Yes, you probably know quite well what I mean, but you do, and I try. So you have to be diplomatic. I see that, I guess, as a woman. It's frustrating sometimes.
Okay, you've said a couple things that interest me. One is that you still do see the power structure mostly male, at least until very recently. Is there a gender difference then here? Do women still have to behave differently, or is there a different reaction to women behaving similarly to men?
Well, I guess it's a yes and no answer. There are some who I think it doesn't make any, I mean, there are some male legislators, I guess, who it really doesn't make a difference, who are just wonderful to work with. And you can be yourself and be, as aggressive or loud or whatever it takes. And there are others, no, that doesn't work at all. I think you have to be very careful, or you get very quickly labeled. And that still goes on. So yeah, I think you have to, and there are some, I think, who have, especially when you come in as a freshman. I guess I'm speaking from having lived through my first 2 years and basically getting along with most everybody, and seeing some freshmen come in and watching them. Some of them make some real classic mistakes of trying to do it all and be it all, and not looking at the structure, because there is, besides the male structure, which is there's the seniority structure, and you have to recognize both, or you don't get anything. You don't get anything seriously. I think you can get kind of pushed off to the side real quickly as a woman who comes in new, if you don't, you can press your issues and you can be aggressive, but you got to do it in a way that leaves the people who are in power their dignity, so to speak. You can't, you got to change their way of thinking, but do it delicately.
Okay. You said your issues, and I'm assuming you really mean each legislator has
Each
certain
person's
issues.
Issue, because I don't necessarily, and I don't like to even be classed as that. There are some women who are real here for some real women and family issues.
Uh-huh.
That's not really ever been my agenda. Not that I'm opposed to helping, but it's not been something I've been out on the forefront.
So turning specifically, when you came here then, and you knew a certain amount about the legislature, although I gather, like everyone else, being here was a little different.
Definitely.
What committees did you ask for? What committees did you get? What game plan did you have to survive and be useful your first 2 years?
Okay. Number one, I was very fortunate in that I knew staff in the minority leader's office.
Mm-hmm.
That helped tremendously. And I knew how important staff is. You never overlook the people who assist you. So that was helpful. I asked for Judiciary, Labor and Industry, and Transportation, and got them all, which surprised me enormously. Judiciary, because it handles a lot of, having just come out of law school, it handled a lot of the issues that I thought were interesting, and because I knew I wanted to work in the area of juvenile offenders, and that's generally where those bills go. So that was a specific request. Transportation I requested because I used to work many years ago in transportation, and my husband is an engineer with DOT, and so it was terms and things that I was familiar with. Shawnee County had a lot of road projects that were pending, so I just thought, why not, ask for that. Labor and Industry was kind of a eeny, meeny, miny, mo in a sense. There were several committees listed, and there were some that I didn't want. Labor and Industry sounded like a good committee for me because, like I said, my district was made up of a lot of blue-collar workers, and so I thought, well, that may be someplace I should, look into. So that, and it was nice that I got them all. To answer your question, I really couldn't tell you why I got them all. I was surprised as a freshman to get the ones that I asked for. So
now, was yours a big, so to speak, incoming class, or?
Fairly, not nearly as large as this one, but it was a fairly large. And I was really surprised. There were several people who wanted Judiciary, and I got it, which really surprised me because there were already some Shawnee County people on there. So I don't know. Just luck.
Got it.
Got it.
Are you still on the same committees? Did you want to be still on?
I asked to stay on the same committees. I got. I spoke to the right people and ended up as vice chair of Judiciary this year, which really pleases me. And wanted to stay on Labor and Transportation, so I'm there. I'm the only female on Transportation. All the other women bailed out on that committee. There were about 4 or 5 of us, and they're all gone. So stayed on there. So the only new thing I have is Special Claims Against the State. It's a joint committee that doesn't meet all the time. It meets year-round, but I got on that committee. I requested to go on that committee, too.
Do you say you work with most people, and that seems to be a pattern that an awful lot of women do follow successfully. Do you feel like you've had mentors, or do you feel like you've had a certain body of people who helped you, particularly in the legislature?
Yeah, I think I have had some mentors, probably to a certain degree. Joan Wagner and Kathleen Sebelius were people I looked up to, but but my way isn't their way. I mean, but I valued their opinion and considered them very successful. And so I guess, I knew I had to find my own way of doing things and getting along with the other members. I mean, I don't think that my style, I guess style is the word I'm looking for. My style is not Joan's and it's not Kathleen's, but they were certainly people who were real positive influences on me.
Can you tell me what differences in styles you think there are? I'm assuming there can be lots of good styles, but...
Joan's much more blunt and straightforward than I am. I would say. Kathleen and I are probably closer to having the same style. But there's still a lot of differences because she's a more savvy politician, I guess. I think she evaluates the political ups and downs probably a lot quicker than I do, and I sometimes am more naive and look at the issue, not necessarily the politics. I mean, so her style is much different than mine. But the way we deal with people is probably similar. Some of Kathleen's and mine.
Are there some bills you've been instrumental in passing that you're particularly proud of, or even a giant loss you're real sad about or proud about?
Yeah, I worked 2 bills that came out real hard. I mean, they didn't have my name on them, but they were my bills in essence. From the House perspective, probably the revamp of the adoption bill was a big thing that I worked on. And
would you spell that out a little bit more?
The adoption bill? Well, it was just a recodification of all of the statutes that deal with adoption in the state. It was kind of a revamp because it went through and put them all together in one section and modernized them, so to speak. Dealt with and granted a lot of rights to birth parents that they didn't have before, actually. Did some protection for birth mothers that needed to be done, waiting period before they can sign consent forms, things like that, cleaned that up. I think that was real important. Required an attorney if the birth mother is younger, required she have independent counsel as opposed to just kind of being out there on her own. That was important. Changed over, well, all the terminology. That's not so great a thing, but it is if you're a birth parent. You don't want to, you don't like the natural parent versus, when we changed all the terminology, it used to be referred to as a natural parent and an adoptive parent, and if you're an adoptive parent, then you say, does that make me an unnatural parent? So, I mean, there was a lot of things that needed to be cleaned up in adoption statutes, so we did that. Primarily, it was a lot of safeguards, though, for birth parents in notice, making sure that they had protection and consent. We got an insurance thing in there at the end that I really liked for ensuring that when you adopted a baby that you had coverage, if you had existing coverage. It wasn't trying to really add anything on, but there were some insurance companies that were not covering a newly adopted infant until it had been in the home for a long time and the adoption was final, depending on how long the period for final. But some adoptions can be final fairly quickly, but if you hit a snag, like some people that, in fact, I know someone personally who it took almost 9 months because of some of the paperwork, and there were some insurance companies that really would not cover that baby for 9 months, even though it's in your home and it's really yours. So we took care of that.
Was there much struggle about that, or was it?
There was quite a bit of resistance. In fact, we got it on in conference. We couldn't get it on in the House at all. The Senate put it on, worked with Nancy Parrish. She was the kind of the counterpoint in the Senate. Got it on in conference, and then fought it out on the floor to get the conference committee report adopted. And there was some opposition, although actually the amendment, or the report, not amendment, it would have been the conference committee report, actually passed fairly easily, but there was a long debate over the issue because of that particular. A lot of people saw it as another insurance mandate. There's a lot of people who think we were mandating a change in insurance coverage that was going to trickle down and cost people a lot of money. So that was the opposition.
Did I bet I would? Okay, so adoption is one bill that you're very proud of being involved in. You mentioned there was another one.
The juvenile felon bill I worked on. Actually, I had introduced legislation. Had co-sponsored, Donna Whiteman was the co-sponsor, and it was much more far-reaching than the juvenile felon bill. But what it was supposed to do was remove, like say, YCAT and Beloit, and create, in essence, juvenile jails that would be under the Department of Corrections for serious violent offenders. Because of the problems that we have with, well, because under SRS custody they can keep them to 21, they really aren't juveniles, and you have some that are in there for murder that if they were convicted as a juvenile they could get out at 21 after maybe serving 2 years, and there's a lot of kind of outcry, and I think rightly so in some instances from the community. So anyway, we had a bill that was to do that and to put it, and Steve Davies was doing such a wonderful job, I thought, with corrections, that we thought that was the way to go, that we would make sure that it was under the custody of Department of Corrections, and totally remove it from SRS. There was kind of a compromise bill that came out that was tagged the juvenile felon bill, which was put together with a bunch of the Attorney General's bills. Some of it I was a little concerned about, but in essence what they could do is right now they can adjudicate from 16 on for certain crimes. They can adjudicate them as an adult. What happens is then they kick them into the adult system. They could get the adult penalties, but they also go to the adult jails, which a lot of us didn't like. Okay, now with the juvenile felon bill, they in essence are adjudicating even down to 14 as an adult, in the sense of they can be under an adult sentencing structure so that they can have more program help, but they have to be housed in a juvenile facility. They can't be put in Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections, they're in their custody, but they have to be housed. What we did was we came up with the idea of it's like a contract basis in essence, that they have to be housed in YCAT or Beloit if it's a female, and but there's more programming sometimes that's available, and that way if you have someone who has committed some really violent offenses and maybe is not ready to be released to the community, there's a mechanism to keep them. Say they committed at 16 and they're adjudicated an adult, we keep them at within the SRS facility like YCAT till they're 18, maybe till they're 21, but then they can be kicked over to Department of Corrections and go into an adult facility if they need to be retained. But there's a hearing process so that they're. But I think that was a good bill. It's a step in the right direction, but I think there's probably more that we should do for juveniles.
God knows it's a big problem.
Yeah, it is.
What future do you see yourself with in politics as a legislator? Do you think you're going to be here in 10 years from now?
I don't know. Different people have I guess I always just see things in the short run. I mean, if you'd asked me 2 years ago would I even be here this year, I wouldn't have known what to say. Yeah, I see myself being here for a few more years because there's more I want to do. 10 years from now, I don't know. I don't know how long I would stay. Because it is draining. It's very time consuming, it's draining, and you feel like you kind of leave your family for a time. Although by the end, 10 years from now, my family will be gone, so I might as well be in the legislature.
Now, I want to follow up that two different ways, so if I circle around, let me slide over to your family. You have a husband, you have how many children?
I have a husband, a stepson who just turned 18, we have a daughter who's 16, and we have a baby that's 8 months that we adopted.
Good Lord, yeah. That's right. What is the impact on your family life, or what is the impact of your family life on your ability to do the legislative job?
The impact on your family is, I try to temper it. I think it's easier for those of us who are local than it is for someone who's out of town. But it's great. There's a lot of pressure on my daughter now, more than, my son is 8 months, and it's difficult for me, but I was lucky enough to be home with him through the summer right after he was born. But it's hard for me because I'm gone all day and sometimes don't get home till 6 or 7, and he's getting ready to go to bed, so I feel bad sometimes. I think the pressure is more my pressure than it is his. I'm lucky to have my mom is the one that sits with him, so he's getting wonderful nurturing care. But I think so the pressure is more on me probably than it is on him. My husband is really good and always has been. He's real supportive, and he does a lot of work around the house during the session. So I would say that it's probably hardest on him. He has to carry an awful lot of the load that I would have done. I do when we're not in session. planning activities, doing things with the kids, even just down to dinners, making sure everybody's fed. I mean, he does that. I mean, he does everything. He goes and gets my mom and brings her to sit. He takes her home at night. I mean, he does everything, really. It's hard on my daughter, I think, because it wasn't so bad the first couple of years, because a lot of people didn't know who I was anyway, I mean, at school or whatever. The kids didn't know that her mom was in the legislature. They're beginning to now, and teachers are beginning to now, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on her to be really good and be, because people are noticing, and teachers, respond to her, oh, your mom's the one in the legislature. And then
almost
she
like
feels,
being a minister's kid, in other words.
yeah, so I think she's going through a period this year that was different than the first couple of years, where she feels like she's in the limelight or something. She feels like people are paying attention to her, not for her, but because she's somebody's daughter. I don't like that, and we're dealing with that. We're trying to work around that. How having a family impacts the legislature? Oh, I don't think it probably has a lot of impact in a negative way, although there are times this year, of course some people say that's good, I don't go to a lot of the functions this year. I have a baby at home, so I don't want to go to the nightly functions. I mean, I don't want to work 7 till 10 every night, every day. So I don't go to a lot of the receptions and things like that, although most of my constituents would probably applaud me for not, because that's just the lobbyist functions, and so. But on the other hand, I have constituents who make up some of those associations. So there are people that I don't see, like independent insurance agents. I have a couple who belong to that association and usually ask me to go and see them, and I didn't go this year, and I usually have gone before. So I guess there's a negative impact in that I value my time somewhat, and so I'm trying to balance how much time I need to give to this and how much time I need to give to the family. Probably, I think, though, the negative is really overshadowed by the positive, though, because I think by having a family, by being a two-working family, I mean, both my husband and myself have to juggle things. I put myself in the same category then as all the other families that are in my district. I mean, I really understand when I talk to women who are struggling, trying to balance both, and they're talking about, what happens if we don't do something about family leave, like the bill that we're doing in labor law right now. So I think there's a lot of positives, because I really know what it's like. I mean, not just up here, even though working up here is different. I work out, other places too when we're not in session. So it's good, and I know, having been through the adoption process, when we have bills that deal with issues like that, everything that I have had to do in my family has an impact probably on how I feel up here, but it also makes me understand when, the adoption triangle comes up with issues, I know what they're talking about. So.
I'll pry as much as you agree with.
That's all right.
It really is very interesting how one manages to hold a job outside of the legislature and be a legislator at the same time. Now, you were rather freshly out of law school when you ran. What do you do for pay when you're not being a legislator?
I scramble. That's the truth. Because just coming out of law school and having this, it was impossible to get hired onto a firm, which is what I had envisioned. I was a really good law student and did all that extra work to be on Law Journal because everybody said you're going to get this wonderful, firm job when you get out, and I can't. There isn't any firm that would hire me because they don't want to let somebody go for 3 months out of the year. So that kind of went down the drain. And it's very hard to start your own practice. So, I've kind of been begging and pleading with people, some attorneys that I know around town, that, to let me come and work with them this summer so that I can get started, because I really haven't gotten much legal practice done. I've done a few things here and there. I did a training thing with Kansas Children's Service League, and I mediate for them on a voluntary basis, and so I've done, because I got that training and I do that, I've done some other mediation then on my own, kind of, I guess, as a consultant type thing on my own. But it's really tough. And in fact, I then also taught part-time in the paralegal program at American Career College. I mean, that was for money. That was just because I needed the income. So,
Sure.
so yeah, I really just scramble. It's really hard, and I don't know how people do it who don't live in the area. I mean, it's hard enough on me living in the area, and I don't know how people do it to have jobs that well, a lot of them don't. Some of them lose their jobs.
So, what would be your conclusion about Kansas's citizen legislators? Do you think it still works?
Not entirely. I think it's really skewed, actually. I think that a lot of it, unless you live close enough that you can do some stuff back and forth, like the people who practice law, on the weekends, they're close enough they can get home on Friday and do some law practice, or they have some business, or they're a teacher that's fortunate enough to be in a school district that's allowing them time off.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not that, then you have to have another source of income. You have to be somebody who has either money to fall back on, they're retired, or they have a business that goes on, that has people that's running the business for them. And I think that's real skewed because most of the citizenry is not that way. So in some ways, I don't think we're a citizen legislature the way that it was intended to be.
Mm-hmm.
When it was set up for 90 days when the harvest there was nothing to do on the farm. I mean, we're not. I mean, we're made up of people who can afford to be here.
What do you see in terms of the direction then that the Kansas legislature is going in terms of more women, 9 women in the Senate, 35 in the legislature?
Mm-hmm.
But with House. Well, get rid of that. Do you see it continuing? Do you think it's going to be 50-50 men and women? Maybe more because the major breadwinners might be men and the only women can afford to be in?
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I think the trend is more women than not because it's probably easier on the woman to if they are a 2-income family, it's probably easier for the man to continue as the primary breadwinner and the woman to take a like me, part-time some of the other time and be able to be up here. I think that's probably true. So I think that, yeah, in that sense, I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I think if other things don't change, I mean, as far as lengthening the term or turning us into, a different type of legislature, yeah, I think that has to happen. I think it'll continue to be more skewed in that sense, although it's not skewed for women. I mean, I think it'd be great if we had more women, but...
We mentioned women's issues a little bit with quotes around it. Do you see the style of the legislature changing? Do you see the issues that are taken seriously in this Kansas legislature changing any because of women being more in the legislature?
I'm probably not the best woman to ask, actually, because I probably have neglected that side of it. I've always kind of just looked to Joan and Kathleen. I mean, they've always been kind of so involved that I looked for some other area to be involved in. I'm sure that, I'm sure women have had an impact on that. I'm sure that has to be. I mean, the primary sponsor for the family leave bill is Joan Wagnon. So, yeah, it's definitely had an impact. And I just always hate it to be women's issues because I hate that label even because I think it should be family issues. I mean, it's things that help the family or children should help the husband as well as the wife. I don't like it being labeled women's issues.
Although truly, historically, family issues have been women's issues as long as women's issues were legitimate at all.
Yeah.
Speaking as a historian,
Yeah.
it makes sense to me. What haven't I asked you? What should I ask you that you'd like to have on the record for the personal experience, the personal perspective of a person who happens to be female who's in the legislature? Oh, I do have something else to ask you.
No, I'll have to think. I don't know.
Okay, while you're thinking, give me a little more of your birth family background.
Okay. Let's see, how personal do I want to get in this? How much do I want to say? My dad worked for the railroad and then for Forbes for the federal government and retired. He's now deceased. been gone about 13 years. My mom's still living, retired.
What did she do?
Well, she calls herself retired because she doesn't like to just say she's a homemaker. I don't know that she really retired from anything. I guess I heard her say retired so often that I say retired. Actually, she was a pretty typical homemaker. She worked outside of the home part-time basis. Did things like, Christmas time she got extra money, would work for Sears or something, part-time. Although she's kind of always had a varied, worked a little and then stayed home with the kids, and worked a little and then stayed home, that type of approach, because we're very spaced. My sister's almost 6 years older than I am, and then my brother, the youngest of the family, is like 10 years younger than I am, so we were spaced out, and so she kind of, was home for a while and then would be out, had no real career in the sense of what you would envision. She worked as a preschool teacher, typical female jobs, actually. She was a preschool teacher, she worked as sales clerk, and the only other thing she's ever done is waitress, and that's probably the thing she liked the most, actually. She was a waitress for a lot of years.
So, would you say then that your childhood role models were pretty traditional? You have a dad who earns the majority of the pay, a mom who stays home, and
in that sense, yeah. Very traditional.
Is there any influence in your life that would shape the fact that you are clearly following what even today are not such traditional laws?
Well, probably what shaped me is that we had a traditional family, but it was somewhat dysfunctional. So it was like to survive, you had to do things. And so I consider myself above all else a survivor. And so I think that probably, and my sister before me. So I think we patterned. We in essence she kind of really mothered me, and then I mothered my brother, actually. And so we were always both of us are very strong and assertive people. And so I think that.
Would you say there was a moment in your life when you suddenly realized that you didn't want to play a traditional female role? I take it you married, you had kids, you interrupted your education. That is, I suppose, more traditional than radical feminist.
Yeah, there definitely was a point. Let's see. I was working for the state. My husband that I'm married to now is my second husband. I married very young at 17 and had a difficult time. My daughter was born when I was 20. I married my husband, who has adopted her since then. When I was 23, worked for the state. At that point, had never gone to college. I graduated from high school, but I'd never been to college, and worked for the state. And I worked in a very male-dominated field. And I was an engineering technician. I was the only female, and it was. It was very hard, and I saw a lot of what at the time I didn't know was sexual discrimination, but now I do, and had a really hard time, and things happened that shouldn't have happened, and I finally got to the point where I was very angry all of the time, and I just said, this isn't for me, and we worked as long as I had to get to a position where I could quit that employment and go to school and work. And so I went to school. I've always worked. I went to school and worked part-time, and was fortunate enough to get some scholarships along the way. That's how I got through school. So. But yeah, I would say that it was definitely a reaction to being placed in a traditional role that was my spur.
So, now that I've picked that up, and you've had time to think or reach the conclusion you don't have something you want to say, what would you like to get on the record about this experience you're having, this revolution you're in the middle of women entering the public sphere more and more and more?
What would I get on the record? Well, I think that it's very rewarding, but it's also costly. I think it's rewarding in the sense of a sense of accomplishment, a sense of commitment. I really do feel like I'm here to make a difference. I guess everybody coins that phrase, but I think I really feel that. But I also know that it's at a cost sometimes of, I think, trying to say that the woman of the 80s or whatever, that you can have it all. I think that's not really true. I think you can't be, a perfect mother, a perfect wife, and a perfect legislator, a perfect attorney. I don't think you can be perfect everything. So there's some costs involved with it.
But you think it's worth it?
I think it's worth it, definitely.
Are you any different? Do people treat you any differently now that you've embarked on this?
Oh, some people, yeah.
Well, your kids' teachers might treat you a little differently.
Yeah, there are those who treat me a little differently, but for the most part, no. And that's what I've liked. For the most part, I mean, my friends are, I'm still, I'm just still Denise, they know me. Families, there's no difference really. Probably there are some differences that I encounter. I never used to be followed in the grocery store before, so I mean there are people who encounter me in the grocery store, and I, when I'm least expecting it, that know me, that I don't know them, and then you're always worried about the time you came in after you mowed the lawn. But so there are some differences. Yeah, there are some people who definitely look at you with kind of an awe.
What would lead you to quit?
What would lead me to quit?
Yeah.
A better offer.
Such as what?
Oh, I don't know. Because I see myself doing this right now. I guess what would lead me, so that I'm not being just joking, if I felt like the work that I had wanted to do was complete, and that I needed to move on to effect some change, I needed to move somewhere else. To do something, to be on the other side, to be somewhere else. And I don't know where that would be. I don't really envision myself moving up in the sense of going for, the governor's office or something like that. Not that it's not a lofty goal, but I see the work that it takes to be at this level, and I don't know that I want to do that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.